Good morning. I am Dr. Suraiya Shahin and today I will teach you modern poetry. What is modern poetry? A writing style of modern poets and characteristics of modern poetry and who are the major poets in modern poetry. In the history of English literature, modern period begins in 1901 and continues until 1939. So, modern poetry spans from the late 19th century and goes to the mid 20th century. Now, what is modernism? What is modernism? Modernism is a reaction to traditional ways of writing style and thinking in the aftermath of the horrors of World War I. As we know that the First World War caused massive destruction to European beliefs, traditions and values. So, the Christianity and traditional values were questioned as they failed to establish peace. People spontaneously broke away the traditional modes and values of life. Since the world changed drastically, people moved from a rural and agrarian society to a more urban and industrial one. As Estrapont defined modernism as make it new. Estrapont defined modernism as make it new means write poem portraying the situation in a new way. A visible change took place in the selection of subject matter, form, and style. As a result of it, modern poets like T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, W. Yeats, and others started questioning what they saw in the society and presented them in their poetry. Now I talk about the major modern poets. Who are the major modern poets? The major modern poets are T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, W. Yeats, Dylan Thomas, W.H. Auden, and Robert Frost. These are the leading poets of modern age. Now I talk about the writing style of modern poets. Since modern poetry emerged in the aftermath of World War I, the poets got an opportunity to reinvent language and express the prevailed new reality. Through their poetry, modern poets aimed to capture what the life was like living during such tumultuous times in a transitional society. As a result of it, symbolism, imagism, existentialism, surrealism, expressionism, psychoanalysis, and stream of consciousness theory were the major new trends that the modern poets adopted in their poetry. Modern poets often abandoned traditional poetic structures and rhyme schemes, and instead of it, they opted free verse. Modern poets opted free verse. Modern poetry is a departure from the traditional regular meter and end rhymes, and instead of it, they often wrote in irregular mode and sometimes they wrote their poem in prose like the prose poem. Modern poets mostly wrote in irregular mode and sometimes they wrote their poetry in prose like the prose poem. Now I talk about the characteristics of modern poetry, and the first is imagery and symbolism. Modern poets make their poetry unique by implying vivid and complex imagery and symbols. Modern poets like W. Yeats and T.S. Eliot use evocative and often abstract images to convey emotions, ideas, and experiences. To serve their purpose, they also use metaphors and other figurative languages. Next characteristic is alienation and disillusionment. Modern poets often explore themes of alienation, disillusionment, and loss of faith in traditional values and institutions. Through the medium of their poetry, they expose the socio-cultural upheavals of their time in the aftermath of World War I. As T.S. Eliot reveals this condition in his famous book, The Wasteland, where Eliot said, "Modern people are physically alive but spiritually dead." T.S. Eliot said, "Modern people are physically alive but spiritually dead." Eliot talks about the disillusionment and loss of faith in traditional values. Next characteristic is fragmentation. Modern poetry often includes fragmentation and different structures in response to a structure, theme, and narrative. And by reflecting the disjointed nature of modern life. The fragmentation of modern poetry can be seen in the form of abrupt shifts in tone, imagery, syntax, and structure, as we find mostly in the poetry of T.S. Eliot. Next characteristic is stream of consciousness. Modern poetry mostly implies a stream of consciousness narrative in their poetry, which gives them an opportunity to know the inner thoughts and feelings of the speaker. Modern poets like T.S. Eliot and W. Yeats emphasize the inner experiences, emotions, and the subconscious, which led to the individual's inner experience and subjective experience. Next characteristic is social and political. Modern poets often engage their poetry with social and political issues of their time. They use their poetry as a platform to unveil the social and political changes and also critiquing power structures, inequalities, and injustices. As Eliot's literary works engage with the social and political issues of that time. Also, W.B. Yeats, in his famous poem, writes, "The second coming is surely at hand." Surely, some revelation is at hand. Surely, the second coming is at hand. W. Yeats means to say that replacing the old civilization, a new civilization is taking place. As a result of violence and terror, a new world in human history is taking birth. So this is all about social and political. Next characteristic is urban and industrial themes. In a changing society, there emerged urbanization and industrialization, which prompted modern poets to explore the impact of these changes on human life. Modern poets also explored the ugly side of the people's life and taboo like drug addiction, prostitution, social crime, and other pertinent issues, as we find in the poems of Allen Ginsberg. And the next characteristic is allusions. Modern poets give references or allude to myth, history, culture, or other works of literature. In the poetry of W.B. Yeats, we find him using myths and culture. T.S. Eliot also used a series of myths and cultural references in his poetry. As Eliot clearly said regarding the mythical background of his book that J.C. Weston's book From Ritual to Romance and James Fraser's book The Golden Bough highly influenced him. Okay, so these are the characteristics of modern poetry. Thank you.